All right, we finally had a game. Got my legs under me as well. So from West Virginia to the preseason game to the big week ahead, let's just look at the state of the Texans in regards to where they sit in camp right now and where they're at. And I think we need to start in West Virginia, and then we need to go to the preseason game, and then we'll look ahead because some stuff has shaped up. Some battles have intensified. Some guys have done well for themselves. It is the Locker Room, number one source for Texans digital content. Appreciate y'all for coming through. On SNL on Tuesday, we will do 53-man roster exercise 2.0. So we'll try to put together where we think the state of the roster is after everything we've seen. Now, I was in West Virginia, and I'll say the biggest events that matter for the long term, the biggest events when it comes to what happened in West Virginia, I think there were a couple. Number one, we got a visual of how they would react if Cam Robinson went down. And I think this spoke to a number of things in a number of ways that they look at this roster and the most polarizing position group on this roster. They moved Titus Howard back to tackle rather than put Blake Fisher as a starting right tackle. They moved Ariante Ursery to the left side, and they completely shuffled. So what that tells us is, rightfully so, they don't have a lot of confidence in Blake Fisher. And despite the fact Titus Howard is going to be a guard, they would rather put Titus Howard at tackle instead of Blake Fisher. Next big event in West Virginia, we got to look at Christian Harris and Dameon Pierce and kind of got a visual of how these guys are looking. And you kind of imagine, didn't get to see them scrimmage. It'll be interesting to see if they partake in the joint practice against Carolina this week. Be nice to see. But you got a visual of these guys, and it felt like these guys could potentially fit on this roster. So you got that. The other thing that you got is you got some adversity when it comes to C.J. Gardner-Johnson. Now, we'll hear Demeco Ryans after the game, but you kind of got some adversity. You avoided, obviously, the worst case scenario. But now we're going to get a look at how they're going to shuffle and how they're going to figure out the safety position. They did add Jalen Mills to the mix. No one really separated themselves yesterday in the game. I think it's going to be a plug-and-play situation. I don't think it's going to be like an extreme reaction. But tomorrow, like in the Petrie line, it'll be interesting to see who they have inside and who they have at traditional safety and if maybe they tweak that. And the Petrie spot is when the DBs go through install, Jalen Petrie's doing something different than the corners and the safeties. And in his line, he's had Miles Bryant with him consistently and Arthur Maulet as well. So we'll see what that looks like. I don't anticipate they move Jalen Petrie back to safety, but those are really the biggest West Virginia events. We also got to look at the offense without Nick Chubb. And I think Dare Ogunbowale, and we'll probably touch on this a little bit more as we transition into the preseason game, but I think Dare Ogunbowale, they can't quit him. He's done a good job for himself the last few days. He's taken advantage of his opportunity, and he's kind of shown why they like him as a football player. And the thing about Dare Ogunbowale that you kind of gain I've gained an appreciation for the last 2 weeks is you often find yourself, and I'm talking about myself, I'm not pointing the finger at anyone else, but you find yourself, while saying that Dare Ogunbowale is an overachiever, you try to find reasons why they like him. And one of the reasons has been, well, he understands, the system familiarity, all that type of stuff. I mean, he's picking up this stuff as good as anyone. And I think probably the best moment of camp for someone trying to make the team, because I do think Dare Ogunbowale, it's a little bit more of an uphill battle to make the team this year than last. But the final series of practice, or one of them, where they're going through a scenario where they have a lead and they need to get a first down to win the game. Dare Ogunbowale, 3 hard runs, and he gets right down as soon as he gets the first down. And I think that football IQ, as well as what we saw yesterday, is why Dare Gumbawale has done quite well for himself. On the super chat, shout out to HDAV Traveler. You ain't never hate.
Swarm.
D1J says Mertz and Slovis are bad. Like they look like high school QBs at best. Yeah, Mertz might just be a practice player. I mean, if you look at what Mertz was in college, he pretty much got beat out at Wisconsin, and then he got beat out at Florida. And now it looks like he's trying to get beat out for the third time on his third straight team as the third string quarterback for the Texans. I don't think they keep either one of these guys. They might still like the upside in Mertz, but I think Mertz is probably just a practice player because what we saw yesterday was bad. It was really bad. Neither of these guys have a lot of time, but yeah, Mertz looked rather rough. So I agree with you on that. So let's get into the preseason game. We just went through what I think the biggest takeaways were in West Virginia. And they're going to have a big week next week. We'll hear from Demeco in a sec. But the most relevant events from the preseason opener, we just kind of touched on it. Dare Gumbawale won't die. The opening drive, solid running behind what many say is a rough offensive line, and the practice week that he had at West Virginia, he looks good. This running back room is going to be really interesting, especially if Joe Mixon comes back at the start of the season. You're going to have to decide between four guys, between Dare, Pierce, Woody Marks. British Brooks has looked good on special teams. I think he's someone they'd like to keep around. Don't necessarily think he makes the initial 53. But Dare Gumbawale won't die. And quite frankly, I'll say this. He looks better than Nick Chubb. And I don't know when it's not too early to say that. But as far as the juice, as far as him, the practice that he had when Nick Chubb was out, he looks better than Nick Chubb. Dameon Pierce looks better than Nick Chubb warming up. We know Joe Mixon is better than Dameon Pierce. Woody Marks can catch the ball. It is going to be interesting to see how they handle the Nick Chubb thing. Now, Demeco Ryans says he'll be back probably this week. What does he look like in a joint practice? When are we going to figure this out? But Dare Gumbawale looks better than Nick Chubb, which it may sound crazy, but not really when you look at what Nick Chubb's been through the last couple of years. But that's just where Nick Chubb is. As far as the Mertz thing, we'll get into some Mertz thing in a second. Then we go to Ursery. And Ariante Ursery looked pretty good. He hung in there very nicely. Ariante Ursery, he hung in there very nicely. And it's obvious that he's your hopeful left tackle of the future. It's very possible that he's a play away from being your left tackle of the present, but he's held up very nicely, and there's some good things to like about Ariante Ursery. Can't say the same for Blake Fisher. Blake Fisher is a guy who has looked completely awful the whole time. And I heard Demeco the other day. He said the most consistent player on the roster. And I thought it was interesting. He said Tommy Togiai was the most consistent player on the roster. That was some strong praise. And he looked pretty damn good the other day. But I will take exception with Demeco Ryans, because I think it was ridiculous to say that Tommy Togiai is the most consistent player. I think it was a little bit much, and I don't know how Demeco missed this one. But the most consistent player has been, I'm not going to say Will Anderson. I'm not going to say Danielle Hunter. I'm not going to say Kambari Lassiter. I'm not going to say Derek Stingley. I'm not going to say Kalen Bullock. And those are my top 5 guys in camp so far. They've performed the best. You're starting corners, you're starting edge guys, and you're starting safeties. They've performed the best. But your most consistent player has been Blake Fisher. Blake Fisher has consistently sucked all camp. I don't think there's very many highs. I think there's a hell of a lot of lows. So I get that Demeco's saying that about Togiai, but if we want to get semantic and we want to get technical, Blake Fisher has been your most consistent player, and he has consistently stunk. He has consistently stunk. And it almost feels like we're on this treadmill, which we've been on so many times. And maybe this is why it's just kind of an eye roll for me. But you immediately know that the offensive lineman isn't showing any promise, isn't showing any hope. And it's always, well, he's young. Let's see what happens next year. It's OTAs. Oh, well, it's OTAs. Practice early on. Well, they haven't put the pads on. Then they put the pads on. Let's see what happens in a game situation. Now, the good news for Blake Fisher is Zach Thomas didn't look much better. But Blake Fisher's been awful. And it hits peaks whenever you see a guy who was drafted in the same round and you see what Ursery looks like compared to Blake Fisher. Nick Caserio said draft picks are 50%. Maybe he just hit 50% on his second round tackles. Maybe that's just what happened. But I don't know to the extent that they know this, because it is definitely a much smarter offensive staff, especially at the O-line, because they didn't even try to pretend when Cam Robinson went down that they would trust Blake Fisher to run with the ones. They didn't even try to pretend. They moved Titus Howard. The whole theme of the Titus Howard offseason has been, oh, he's a guard now. They moved him back to tackle. And they move Ursery to the left side. And they start Ursery on the right side with the ones. So I just wonder, if there's ever a situation where they got to figure it out, if they even feel comfortable enough to put Fisher out there. Because it just seems inevitable that this might not be for him. Is it too early? I don't know. I mean, I like what I see from Ursery. I'm not sitting here dismissing him. We've seen guys start off rough and then revive themselves. I'm just saying they don't seem to believe in Blake Fisher right now. They shouldn't believe in Blake Fisher right now if they have their eyesight. So how do they handle that, and how does he handle it? It's definitely something to check out. But yeah, the Blake Fisher stock, it dropped even more the other day. And that's just kind of where it is. Gavin King on the soup says Mertz was such a wasted pick. I don't mind kicking the tires on a quarterback in the 6th round. Matter of fact, I would love to do it. And Demeco comes from San Francisco, where they got Brock Purdy with the last pick in the draft. The Patriots, even when they had Tom Brady, they'd bring in quarterbacks late or undrafted. They had Hoyer, they had Mallett, they had Matt Castle, they had Jacoby Brissett. They did a pretty good job of finding Garoppolo. They did a pretty good job of finding guys to back up their franchise QB. My problem with Mertz was he was never good in college. That's what's confusing. It's not like you brought in some guy, and the examples I use, Matt Castle just didn't get to play. Some of these guys were just kind of raw, but Mertz basically got beat out twice. He has looked good in practice, though, just not in the game. Gavin, follow up. As soon as Ursery came in, you could notice the difference on the left side. Yeah, Ursery's a nasty mofo, man. Cougar says, I'm surprised that you're a little surprised by how Bullock has looked so far. Was a dog last year and only got better. The secondary is scary. I mean, I think surprised is a little dramatic. I'm just saying he's been even better than you could have imagined. I mean, he's one of the top 5 players in camp. I didn't have that on my bingo card. But he's looked good. He's looked more physical. He said recognition was something that he was going to work on. He seems to kind of be feeding off the energy. Kamari Lassiter is absolutely dominating in camp. But yeah, I mean, I think there were questions about how Kalen Bullock would look. There still is. Will the lows be too low? And the highs be able to cancel it out. But I mean, in camp, yeah, I'm surprised that Blake Fisher's a top, or Not Blake Fisher. I'm surprised that Kalen Bullock's top 5. He's been great. If only they could evaluate offensive linemen the way they do DBs, we would have no concerns. We would have no concerns at all. All right, so other stuff from the preseason, most relevant stuff from the preseason. We already talked about Ursary looking solid. EJ Speed looks like a good reserve linebacker. It's nice insurance. We'll see how much more they not rely, but how much more they put on Christian Harris's plate. Maybe we see him in joint practice. That would be nice. Or at least even just like a normal practice. But EJ Speed was a good insurance policy. He's tall. He's fast. He's got good instincts. He plays special teams. I mean, that was good insurance policy for Christian Harris. EJ Speed. And I think he played his way. I think he was already on the squad, but I think he played his way into at least the coaches liking what they saw from him. He was all over the place. The next thing, and I wonder if the numbers game is going to get interesting at this position as we talk about the most relevant events from the preseason opener. Is Berrios wide receiver 6 or 7? I think that's a question that we need to ask. Early on, he did great for himself because he was making plays in camp. He's clearly the guy that they trust the most in the kick game. But numbers are numbers. And you do have other guys in the slot that are capable of performing and doing other things, including getting in the return line. But what we saw yesterday from Braxton Berrios, let's just be honest, that's almost like porn to Nick Caserio and Nick Caley. Seeing the way he looked yesterday in the preseason game. I mean, they come from the place where Wes Welker and Julian Edelman were making plays, and then Julian Edelman and Danny Amendola, and then Nick Caley went and saw Puka and Cooper Kupp. Like that style of receiver and that style, it probably makes them feel some type of way. Makes them football horny. But you look at the wide receiver room and where it's at. I think 5, we can all agree that what we initially thought was the top 5 has been the top 5. And Xavier Hutchinson's done an excellent job for himself. They're putting him back there at kick return and everything. Do I still feel like you should feel confident if Xavier Hutchinson's your 2 on any given Sunday? Probably not, but the guy's gotten a lot better. And he had a hell of a week in West Virginia. And then yesterday he showed some things. But right now, your top 5, Nico, no particular order. Nico, Knoll, Higgins, Kirk, Hutchinson. Those 5 are safe. Now, the question is, do they keep 7 again next year? And does that mean that Watson and Berrios are on the team? Because I think they like Watson. I just think even with all the praise that Demeco had for him, Xavier Hutchinson has just had such a good camp that I don't think that goes unnoticed. Sometimes it's not just about what you do. If the guy that you're brought in to push or whatever performs, then that brings it up. So the question is, do they keep 6 or 7? And let's say they just decide to keep 6. Do they decide on Berrios over Watson based on what we've seen from Hutchinson and based on the fact that the shot callers, the decision makers, they like that style of ball? Maybe they keep 7. Jakob Johnson might end up being a practice squad guy. There's no assurance that they're going to keep a fullback. You could also look at it as keeping 4 tight ends. The numbers are going to get interesting here. And I wonder, is Berrios wide receiver 6 or 7? Like, is he being kept around as like a luxury because he returns much like Steven Sims last year? Or if they decide to keep 6 and they have to decide between Berrios and Watson, what do they do? The numbers are going to get interesting. Shout out to Tate on the suit. Appreciate you, my friend. Then we get to some other stuff that happened with the Texans in the preseason opener. And we go into the trenches. And I don't know what the relevance of this is. Darrell Taylor has looked like a really good rotation reserve end in camp. Yesterday, I think he probably gave the coaches a nice dose of playing for a long time. He initially got injured, went in the tank, came out, and then played a lot, was involved in a lot of plays, the good ones and the bad ones. I think Darrell Taylor is, I don't know what they think of him. Like, do they think that maybe that Darrell Taylor could be an upgrade from Derek Barnett? Or do they look at Derek Barnett as a guy that you can just plug into the third role? Because we haven't seen Derek Barnett in this camp. We know what he's done, and we know how he's had some pretty solid moments for Demeco Ryans and company. But I think Darrell Taylor played his way into a role. I actually think the Birdman, Solomon Byrd, is kind of on the outside right now, kind of fighting for his life. But I think Darrell Taylor, I wonder how they look at Darrell Taylor. I definitely think they look at him as a guy that's going to be in the rotation. It's just a matter of like, how high up do they think? Do they think he could be what Demeco liked about Derek Barnett? And when does Derek Barnett come back? That's the other question. Maybe he'll have to be for a little bit of time regardless. Next takeaway from the preseason game, Tremont Smith had some good moments at corner. And one of the biggest events for me at camp, and this, I was never really like panicking too much about it just because of the snap shares and the way the Texans play defense. But corner depth was something that was a big concern for a lot of Texans fans. You brought in Ronald Darby. Ronald Darby retires. Jalen Smith, for whatever reason, was looked at as an inside guy. And, you're kicking the tires on Damon Arnett. You don't know how desperate they are at CB3. But I think the Texans are kind of set at corner. I think Tremont Smith, in the limited opportunities he's gotten, he's going to be one of your special teams aces. I think he's done a hell of a job at cornerback. And I think Jalen Smith, the way he plays on the outside, he was involved in a few plays or a couple near the sideline. I think that those guys can definitely do their thing at corner. I think you're fine at corner. I don't think corner is like a massive area of concern. Another thing from the preseason game, this isn't really relevant. This is just nice of Demeco. Some reps for Matt Burke. Some reps from Matt Burke calling the defense. So Matt Burke was on the side. He was clearly calling the defense. I guess that's good reps for Demeco to give him. Other thing that was interesting, and I don't know if this is going to be a full-time thing, Nick Caley was in the booth. I don't know if y'all noticed that. Nick Caley was in the booth. He was calling it from up there. Maybe next game he's sidelined. Maybe he's just trying to figure out what he can get, or where he can get comfortable. But Nick Caley in the booth, a little bit interesting. Next thing, Neiman might be a game time player. I know he was brought in to be like one of the special teams aces. Practice, he looks all right, but it seemed like even on his defensive reps, it might make more sense when they brought him in as to why now. He's kind of a game time player, it feels like Mertz feels like a practice player. Neiman feels like kind of a game time player. He likes to bring the rice out whenever there's something going on. Next takeaway. We saw this. Man, D'Angelo Ross is straight work. We saw it last year in Green Bay. When the perfect passer rating from Jordan Love, although I thought he kind of hung in there a little bit. Man, they were just seeking him out in the preseason. I know they like him. I know they like the special teams, but man, when Ross is out there, it is an absolute seek out. Jacob says, will this be the hardest Texan cut down in Texan history? I mean, it seems pretty tough. I mean, the roster is very deep, and that's something they've done a good job at. I wouldn't say it's deep on the O-line, but I would say you can make a case everywhere else is pretty deep. Like as far as guys that can play on other teams. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know where it would be much more difficult. It's the most difficult that I've seen since I've been covering the team closely, like the last decade plus. So, yeah, I would say it's got to be up there. I don't even know what would be in the discussion. But it's not going to be easy. There's some tough decisions to make. There's tough decisions just from a talent perspective, and then there's tough decisions based on the numbers game at each position and the style they want to run. And you got some guys that play special teams really well, defense, all that. It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Other stuff off the news. So that's the relevant stuff from the game. Now we're going to go to Carolina. So we've talked about the biggest happenings at West Virginia. Now we talked about the biggest happenings in the preseason game, and now we go to Carolina, and it's going to be a big ass week. Before we get into what to watch for there, as well as perhaps what to watch for ahead of time, and something weird that happened at my fantasy draft involving CJ Stroud. Let's hear from Demeco real quick and what he has to say heading into the week.
For the game today, I was really pleased with our first offensive group, the way they stepped out, very efficient. I liked everybody just being calm and composed. Davis did an excellent job of driving the ball down the field, commanding the huddle, putting the ball in really good placement. Then to see Dare have a couple of nice runs there, that's playing behind his pass, and it was a really nice finish to the drive with Berrios, like him not only catching and securing the football, but finishing physically through the end zone.
Maybe specifically your offensive line on that first drive and Ariana did some nice things.
And from my point of view, our O-line did a really nice job of controlling the line of scrimmage, which when we did run the football, there was no one in the backfield. There was no penetration, and it all starts up front. So I feel like those guys did a really nice job of setting the tone. And that's what we want to see from the offensive line. You come out, be physical, set the tone for the offense, and I thought that first group did a nice job of that. And Braxton has done it a long time in this league. He finds a way to get open. He made a lot of nice catches for us today. Also in the return game, he's very experienced, and you see that experience shows up in game time. So excited to see him continue to grow. And he started off really hot, and so excited to see where he transcends. Yeah, defensively, saw some really nice plays from the linebacker spots. EJ, nice physical hit there. Jamal making some plays. Nick Neiman. You got a lot of guys stepping up, making plays defensively. Just with this group, we still have to figure it out. Those guys are competing, and competition makes everyone kind of step their game up. So excited to see those guys this next week, see how they continue to progress. Preseason, it's tough to evaluate guys, but we don't use just the games. Like, I'm evaluating everything with these guys. That's the meeting room, like how you show up in practice, like what are you doing throughout the week, how have you grown from their first day to now. So it's an exhaustive process of really evaluating these guys, not just hanging my hat on one game or even the 3 games, because I know reps will start to get limited the more our first groups get more. Yeah, I'm really proud of our guys, like being on the road for a week, really proud how everyone handled it. Thankful to our staff for making this such a seamless transition. Like, we have a ton of great people who work for us, help us out, help the players be able to perform at their best. Thought we did a nice job this week of bonding, being at the Greenbrier, and we grew closer as a unit. We got better as a football team. Now this next week, I'm looking for us to take that next step. Like, can we continue to improve, continue to grow? We'll have Carolina coming in. We'll have a joint practice next week. So excited, again, to go against someone else in practice and see how that week turns out. All our receivers did a really nice job. I mean, Mechie showed up making plays. I mean, you had Braxton making plays. A ton of different guys are showing up. So that's still, we got a really full room of guys there who can play in the NFL. So it's going to be tight competition, down to the wire. Yeah, CJ's in great spirits. He's doing well. I mean, we're all thankful that the injury is not as extensive as it was first reported. So we are excited.
Not as extensive as it was first reported. Oh man, he's talking about one person there. There weren't multiple reports on that. He's talking about Marin Wilson.
That he'll be fine. Take some time. He'll continue to progress and get better. So, thankful to know we'll be seeing them back on the field this year. And always with all of my guys who are in any injury situation, it's about those guys, me caring for them, making sure they are in a good spot mentally and physically. And CJ, he's great. He wants to be around the team, still had a smile on his face. But he'll be back, so we're excited about that. When you mix guys in the preseason, especially on the defensive side, it's not so much about the chemistry. What I'm looking for here in the preseason is, can a guy go out and execute the techniques and assignments of what he's been asked to do? Can he do it in the right manner? And you'll see some guys who are consistent and some guys are not. So I'm looking for who can we rely on, who can we trust? And I'm looking for guys to show up and prove to their teammates that you can trust me to be where I'm supposed to be. You can trust me to do the job that I'm asked to do. So it doesn't really matter about who's in or when they're in, but can you perform at a high level? All good. All right. See y'all in Houston.
There you go. That's somebody who's ready to be home and someone who accomplished a hell of a lot on the road, though. This has been a very well laid out camp as far as not dying. And I talked about this the other day. Like, a lot of times, there's no real intrigue and when you get to this point, it's like, man, just get it over with. It's not the case here. They got a lot of tough decisions to make, and they need to see a few things this week. It would be nice. It would be nice to measure, what does Carolina's offense look like against the Texans' first team defense? What does that look like? Vice versa. Are the Texans going to completely rough up Carolina and their offense? Are they going to look like the elite defense that they've looked against each other? But I think being able to see what the Carolina offense looks like, and their defense too, although I don't think they're like world beaters, it's definitely going to be some lightweight for the Texans against their defense compared to years. But that's pretty important. How does CJ look against a different defense? Then we want to see the joint practice. We want to see how the offensive line holds up against other guys. Like, we got to see this. We got to see the safety situation. By the way, the Texans added Jalen Mills to the room. We got to see the safety position. Just preparing. Because they got the valuable lessons they got last year is they had or last week. You adjust to what life would be like without CJ Gardner-Johnson. You adjust to what life would be like without Cam Robinson. Not serious injuries, so you're getting an opportunity to proactively kind of evaluate your depth almost. Not saying they don't do that anyways, but when you're forced and the guy's on the sidelines and he's not going to be on the sidelines too long and perhaps not even for the regular season, it's a hell of an opportunity. That was a big thing for the Texans. Now you got guys coming back from IR. What does it look like when Damian Pierce and Christian Harris, the practices intensify, hoping they get to that area? They're running full speed. They're going through walkthroughs. Are we going to see them in drills? Are we going to see them in team? Are we going to see him perhaps practice against Carolina? That's exciting. How will they handle that? Do we hear any news about any other guys perhaps returning to the mix? There's still some names. Demeco Ryans, Derek Barnett. Mixon, obviously, not expecting. But you got that. So this is a big week for the Texans, and they'll be back. We'll get a joint practice. We'll get another game. We'll get a reaction Monday tomorrow on SNL. It's going to be fun. By the way, in my fantasy league, my previously mentioned fantasy league, which I drove to right after not getting on our flight, or not too far from that. CJ Stroud not drafted in my league. Did the league make a mistake? 12-team league. No CJ Stroud, no Bryce Young, no Anthony Richardson. Nobody wanted anything to do with any of these 2023 first-round quarterbacks. Nobody wanted anything to do with it. CJ Stroud not drafted. Fair or foul? Remember last year he was in the top 3 mix. Fair or foul? Real question. Someone said he had CJ got drafted 62. That must be a Texans league. That must be a little Texans league. Appreciate everyone for coming through. Subscribe, like, right along, and always remember, when it comes to this Texan stuff, we're all in it together. Going to be a hell of a week.
Yeah, it's the Locker Room on YouTube. You know what it is. Let's get it. Hey, Locker Room. Yeah, we in the locker room. Texas talk. Yeah, you know.